Hello, I'm Alexandra Summit, founder of the Portwood Institute for Art and Healing in Okemos, where I have my art studio in Michigan. As a practicing artist and healer, my work has included the study of esoteric healing based on the energy centers and chakras, with my certification in the healing codes and life coaching. I've lectured on yoga theory and practice, which includes 37 years of teaching college yoga, going on 39 now. I think I'm possibly going to get a fall class, and developing many classes around the practice of yoga and art, with several one-person shows, group shows, and paintings and sculpture commissions around the country. I designed the award medallion for the Michigan Women's Hall of Fame, which had been given to well over 300 recipients. Today, I have been asked by Dr. Margaret Dwyer, founder of the Energy Medicine Research Institute, to develop curriculum in the visual and performing arts. I hope to communicate why this is so important for the research and validation of bioenergy medicine. I'd like to talk with you a little today about why Dr. Dwyer included the visual and performing arts as a key component of the curriculum designed to train medical professionals and interested people to create research designs on the biofield and energy medicine. I'll describe some of the work I've done and lead you in a technique that will help you access your own goals in any area, which we've just done. I want to assure you, art gives you eyes, it gives you ears, but art does not necessarily oppose systems already in place. According to Marshall McLuhan, who coined the term global village, I'll explain more in a moment. This is a painting of Shirley Chisholm from my 2016 show entitled Women Who Broke the Glass Ceiling. I'll just hold that up for a moment. I designed the show to shape the sensibilities toward accepting that women could hold high office. And here we are 4 years later, and we have a female vice president of African American descent and Asian descent and heritage. I had help, of course, shaping the country's sensibilities by the rest of the culture, but I like to think I played a little role there. I painted 13 of the 47 women who ran for president of the United States. Even though there had been many female candidates, everyone in the audience that night, when I performed the night before the election in 2016, had never heard of any of these women's accomplishments. It was just not on the radar. It hadn't made it into the consciousness of people as a part of mainstream knowledge. I performed at the Robin Theater, and it was not meant to oppose the current system of sponsoring men to hold the highest offices, but rather to highlight some of the women who had broken through for the purpose of shaping sensibilities as to new possibilities. Back in the 1950s, with the advent of television and media and the all-at-onceness of experience, Marshall McLuhan said that our only hope was to let artists run the world, because they are on the forefront of helping the world move ahead with new visions. The art process is where we are allowed to think outside the box. This is a little circuitous, but I wanted to share how McLuhan put it and why he said it. Artists took up the cause, I'm using this as a quote, and it's a little bit dense, of formal causality. Only they talked about formal causality as if it were art in which the forms of things began to be insisted upon as having something to say to humans, and above all, that the arts had the power to train human sensibilities. When I was presenting my research at the Art Education Conference some years ago, they gave us a tote bag with the words, "Fear no art." And it's true, there's really nothing to be afraid of from art. But the fact that they used that saying so we could carry these around has to tell you something. It's only discoveries and new vistas to be made from an association with the arts. And that's why Dr. Dwyer has included the arts in her conceptualization of how we might prepare researchers interested in designing projects to establish the efficacy of energy medicine in the biofield and in whole person and nonviolent healthcare. You've heard of the arts being referred to as the avant-garde, and I capitalized on that term when I was trying to convince the education department at Michigan State University of the value of the arts in education, because believe me, it was a tough road to hoe. It was not something that came naturally in their thinking. I wanted them to know that it's a megatrend and it's the bellwether of the future, so why wouldn't we want to look at that? We can use this aspect of art training human sensibilities to shape the transition to incorporating the concepts of quantum physics into creating health and understanding human medicine in terms of an updated science of the 21st century. Nature is all-encompassing. It's alive. It is flowing from the earth to us and from us to the earth. We can use that flow to begin to shape our research on the bioenergy field and energy medicine. Where we got into trouble in science was in thinking that matter had no consciousness. Einstein spent his life searching for this missing element because of that prevailing perception that resulted in asking the wrong questions. Beginning from the belief that matter had no consciousness, since our brains were filled with matter, consciousness did not even exist as a topic for educating and culturing health. The indigenous people, such as the Maori in New Zealand, cannot even imagine not considering the body, mind, and spirit together in their healthcare practices. I remember stepping off a plane in New York City to visit my friends after completing my comprehensive exams. It was a big moment, and stepping smack dab into the middle of a city filled with ugly art, and it had become the norm. In the greatest capital of art in the world, it was the art that expressed the view that something was wrong, that art could not express beauty, or that the beauty of art in shaping the sensibilities of the public to be beautiful and true had to express the frustration and lack of communication between people, and was the sensibility that art was showing us beautifully but woefully. This was the sensibility the art was registering in 1990 and training us to see. My artist friends who had come to celebrate with me were appalled, and their beautiful work from the Midwest was not terribly well received because of that whole movement of art that was really, truly not beautiful. Social forms of organization had been seriously questioned on college campuses after the placid 1950s and exploded in the 1960s when the generation gap peaked. In New York City in 1990, the expression was bleak, and 26 years later, the ugly, presaged in 1990 in the visual arts, had erupted in politics. The advance guard, the same phenomena can be seen in any historical epoch by looking at the art produced. Sandra Seaton writes plays and librettos that bring to light African American experience beyond the mainstream stereotypes, and thereby acts to train our sensibilities newly. This is a flyer I made of her work, a poster rather, with Kara Keller. We stayed up all night and we made 2 posters for her opening at Kellogg Center, Michigan State. And what she did was use, I can't see what it looks like. What she did was write a play called Music History. That was the flyer for it. And the law school was kind enough to Xerox copies of things from the civil rights movement. This is the people at the lunch stand where they were being arrested, and there's Martin Luther King talking at Michigan State University, and the marches and so on. And then at the same time, here's Alpha Kappa Alpha, which our new vice president is a member of, by the way, and having their sorority meeting on campus. It's the Black Women's Sorority. And just normally attending classes like anybody else. And so the normality of the life of African Americans is something that we don't normally have expressed. And so what she is doing that. It was a couple of students in college that came to college, and they were contrasting their interests and tastes in music. And then the young man ended up going on the Freedom March on the buses down there. And I won't tell you the ending, but I'm sure you can imagine. Another influential art form that shapes how our lives are spent is the structure of architecture. The architecture that preceded the takeover in Syria from 1923 to 1943 allowed the people of the city of Homs from different faiths to live together in peace. As the groups were located outside the gates of the city, using this newfangled, modernistic, progressive architecture that the French had brought, the groups lost their tolerance for each other and found their differences irritating and began fighting. The result was the longest continuous war over a city, according to the Syrian female architect Marwa el-Saboni. This resulted from the developments brought about without consideration of what the people needed in Homs and what they had achieved by the way it was there. These were the progressive Europeans causing chaos, which erupted due to the change in the architecture, the modernization. Dr. El-Saboni ended up having to stay in Homs. She had 3 small children, 2, 3, and 5. Because of the continuous bombing, it was impossible to leave. So for that time when they were growing up, they stayed right there, ducked the bombs. As our own capacities are expanding, and we have been thrust into a mandatory evolutionary phase, we have the opportunity to expand the sensibilities of the formal world of medicine based on Newtonian physics and the materialist reality where only seeing is believing. When everything begins happening all at once, the rudder of control is lost, and we really need new tools and techniques to free the mind from old technologies that explain the world as in the Clockwork Orange. The way we've been educating sets us up for linear ways of thinking. I mean, if you think about it, phonics, and the word, to understand the words, you have to read one word at a time, one letter at a time. Getting into the flow, the immediacy of experience is vibrating us, however, today, where the frequency of our thoughts is meditative and our minds are opened to something other than what the mind kicks up from the past or worries about the future, and makes you available for the all-at-onceness of lateral learning. Understanding lateral thinking expands our minds and can be accessed through the arts. Rather than filling your heads with new and admittedly useful information, which you really have to have, the step-by-step processes like school requires and promotes, we need to learn to negotiate the world, certainly, so that is totally necessary, where we had to learn to use those words on the printed page and develop ideas in a sequential fashion. Most teaching in school is linear, and since most of us were trained this way, where we were learning to follow the words on the page in order to succeed in school, it's the opposite of seeing things all at once, as we do when our sensibilities are being trained and shaped by looking at art or at a theater performance. Einstein's well-known statement that there are children playing in the street who could solve some of my top problems in physics has to do with this state of innocence, where children who had not yet learned to think in a step-by-step fashion, but could see things all at once in lateral fashion, as we do when we're listening to music, could see answers the rest of us could not, with our structured capacities. The children had the abilities and potentials that may be lost with the training in linear thinking we receive in schools, that may well disqualify us to think outside the box and see and hear laterally in the all-at-onceness. The children had abilities and potentials that may be lost with training in linear thinking we receive in schools, that may disqualify us to think outside the box and see and hear laterally in the all-at-onceness. By using the structure of art experience, which by nature is open-ended, you will open the doorway to creative ideas and even experience directly information from the energy field, and consequently create ideas for research to verify the viability of bioenergy treatments. Life is made in consciousness of the unified field. Here is the access point in the healing art I've created to place viewers in direct experience of the biofield and the conscious unified field level of experience. I use a schematic for the energy centers of the body based upon the barberry crop circle that appeared in England. This upper circle I think of as the old-fashioned windmill, toy windmill children have, that takes energy from the universe, steps it down so that it can be used by us. And here's a schematic of us. The circle, and then we have this interior space that is being now explored newly in our new world. So this flower, this rose represents you, and then over here is how energy is delivered to plants on our planet, how growth occurs, in other words. And it is in mathematical proportion called the Fibonacci spiral. Now, if you think in these, you see there's a triangle there. And if you take this centerpiece and think of this as a target with the three sizes and pull this out, you end up with something like this. So this is a tetrahedron, and it's 4 equal sides. Every side is equal. And this is the basic Platonic solid on which energy is built in our universe, and perhaps in our universe, but certainly on our planet. And so if you think of this tetrahedron moving in all directions and going around in a circle, then you end up with this shape, and this is what the quantum physicists are using to represent hyperspace. Here's our world, here's our Earth, and in the center of our Earth, it does feel like that lately, doesn't it, is the North and South Pole. These things go around it. So you can see that this shape also has to probably do with our energy centers or chakras. The energy centers in my imagination maybe are these spinning vortices of light. And as these spin, they actually create such a vacuum because they're spinning so fast. Now, remember, this is all spinning in all these directions, all at once. It just goes, and you suck in the environment and the experience from the environment, and it blends with your physiology, and you then create your biography out of that. Your biology becomes your biography, shaped by the environment. And the way we move from experience to experience is always in a spiral. It's not in a straight line. And we thank Buckminster Fuller for that insight. Okay. This is another schematic of the 3 permanent atoms from the subtle body. So we're into the material of the subtle body, and this was a commission from the esoteric healing group I was with, and they had me make this for Dr. Barbara Briner, who took esoteric healing so far beyond what it had been in England in the theosophical work. So we have this basic 3 permanent atoms that go in this drum. And this is a community drum too. So when this drum was struck, it called the community together. And we also had personal drums, but this was the community drum. Whether it's a religious sacrament or a medical specialty, cardiologists, internists, gynecologists, proctologists, or eye, ear, nose, and throat doctors, the practices are arranged according to the energy centers and nerve plexuses, and connected to an endocrine gland. Each of the specialties is centered around that. So in religious practice, there are sacraments that relate to each of the energy centers. Carolyn Mace has pointed out. And although we do not as yet have measurement techniques to register their activity, you can think of chakras or energy centers as vortices that are the interface with the environment between your biology and the creation of your biography. Quantum physicists use the spinning tetrahedron or torus, and that was the shape I showed you with the slinky going around the Earth in all directions, where in each cell in our body and our individual bodies have this field around them as well. Remember that each cell in your body, as was pointed out to me by Marcel Vogel, the inventor of liquid crystals, our watches have, while he worked at IBM. And then he worked extensively with crystals, but he was explaining that each cell, each molecule of our body is an individual sun, and this sun exists independent of the sun that we get our beautiful trees from and our plants that we might eat. So this Barberry Castle crop circle came to me when I was recovering from surgery. I was a captive audience, and it certainly implanted in my brain. And I made collages that I took around to healing fairs all over the Midwest to use as facilitators of healing. The shape of underlying form on our planet is the platonic solid, the tetrahedron, that 4-sided shape. That energy has to be stepped down, as that top circle on the crop circle shows, because you would have a little trouble if you tried to plug your energy circuit direct, like if you wanted to make your toast and you put it into the DTE tower directly. That would be dangerous, and you couldn't do that without hurting yourself. So the energy is stepped down from the planet and then goes into the energy of yourself, as represented by that tetrahedron shape when the circle comes out in that particular crop circle. We are all creative beings. It's our natural state. Using the artistic process, we will explore the contents of our own inner consciousness, even our blind spots, free from the confines of previous learning about how the world works. When you watch the sun rising in the east, it's easy to see how people would have thought we were the center of the universe and the sun went around our planet. The reality turned out to be quite different, but not until enough anomalies had occurred to dispute the commonly held belief, which our eyes would see. Philosophers, scientists were imprisoned for disputing what everybody simply observed and seemed perfectly obvious. It was impossible to discover the truth until the right questions could be asked. Going from the premise, which was believed at the time, the questions could never be asked. How do you get there? Releasing stress is necessary, isn't it, in order to formulate new questions. So that's where we will be using meditative techniques in our class and also an art process. We will strive to open new pathways to our knowledge as we explore line, shape, and form. These elements contact pre-language parts of your brain. Let's try this now. If you'll all take a deep breath, and it's a special kind of breath because what I'd like you to do is put your hands right below your navel on your abdomen, lower abdomen, because what we're going to do is actually relax the lower abdomen. It will push out, and the reason we do that is because the lower lobes of the lungs are being held by the diaphragm, and if we can release the diaphragm by relaxing the muscles below it, then your lower lobes will fill and you'll get a complete breath. So let's try that now. And by the way, this is the #1 stress reduction technique in the world. Breathing into your lower abdomen and releasing that breath. Just easy going, easy going, easy going, and breathing in, filling the lower lobes of the lungs by releasing the lower abdomen, in, and now going out, breathing out, releasing that breath, and one more time, releasing the lower abdomen, breathing in. And release. That's great. This is the complete breath. Now I'd like you to think of a time in your life when you felt really wonderful. Something wonderful happened. I always am able to think of the birth of my daughter. When I looked down at my wrist and there was a little bracelet that said live birth, I woke up. And that always is so uplifting and the world feels so right. I want you to pick a time like that or make one up if times have been too rough. Make one up. Now put that feeling in every cell of your body. That's it. Every cell, every hair follicle, every toenail, every bit of your organs, the heart, solar plexus, pancreas, gonads, lower abdomen, throat. Good. And your entire scalp relaxing in your head. That good feeling is there. Now, I want you to pick a goal that you'd like to work for. This can be, I'd like to know what my research project is going to be. This might be, I'd like to, make a grocery list to go to the store after this session. Anything is appropriate, or I need to clean out the drawers in the office desk. Pick a goal. Now with that good feeling in your body, mind, I want you to imagine that you are taking the first step toward that goal. And this is just going to last a minute. So it's got to be quick. What is your first step? It's the next thing you're going to have to do to get this project going and this goal achieved. Now you're at the middle section of it. It's starting to really come together. You're really feeling it. And now you are toward the end, and now you are finally complete, and you feel wonderful. You achieved your goal. And that's it. This is mental rehearsal. A couple of women went over to Russia to study what Laszlov's work had done for the Russian athletes, because the Olympic athletes were being trained using mental rehearsal, as we've just done. This is the technique. And that's why it took us a long time to start using that in this country and start winning the Olympic feats. So I hope you enjoy that, and try it often. It just takes a few minutes. You don't have to go into big detail. The first class in the arts curriculum will address the energy centers of the body and identify goals you set for yourself to achieve through visualization, which will help you discover what areas of research you might want to pursue. I know there are some of you who may think that you don't form pictures before words and concepts, but according to the great art philosopher Rudolf Arnheim, we all do, even if we're not aware of it. The education through school has not put any focus on this, so you may not even be aware of it. But through a series of projects, we'll tap into that level, and no matter how you contact the visual level, you will be doing it correctly. Trees communicate underground. If there's one tree in the forest group that's doing poorly, their roots system of other trees will send them their own nutrients to support the tree in need. In Judeo-Christian thinking, Genesis has a beginning. However, in Buddhism, there is no beginning as well as no end. How can we reconcile these two? Now there is a way to do that by understanding that we're undergoing continual genesis with multidimensional timelessness. And according to Michio Kaku, we have an ocean of timelessness that is in continual genesis. That's why we use the artistic process for ideas on conducting research. During this process, no matter what thoughts come up, we ask the critic, which we each have, a part of ourselves, to stand over there in the corner and wait there until we call them back, because you certainly need critical thinking at times. And we just continue with the art process. On your first assignment, you may be asked to express the energy of that critic and just how it occurs for you in line, shape, and color. No graphic skills are needed, but it can be used as you choose. You'll be asked to identify your research interests, and we will use the process and materials of art to open up creative pathways. Finally, from the standpoint of inner silence or a meditative state, I've been given permission to use quantum physicist Dr. Jerry Falwell's techniques. He has been called the Einstein of physics by Time magazine. We will use his methods for creating miracles in which you will be placing yourselves in the consciousness of the unified field to create magic, as he puts it, using neuroscience and quantum physics, which he comes by quite honestly. You can check out his workshops on Zoom. The answers you seek are instantaneously available to you in every moment, as you will experience. Two deeply unquestioned assumptions in science are that matter doesn't have any awareness, that it's insentient. How does consciousness come into existence then? The twist is that these concepts of consciousness that we have not served us well into the new age of science. The research we will be designing will be intended to remedy this situation. The research we will be developing will be intended to remedy this situation. The twist is that these concepts of consciousness that we have not served us well into the new age of science. The research we will design and be developing will be intended to remedy the situation. Major changes in science have never been brought about by isolated experimental findings, but by collective evidence. It's essential that scientists come together to share their data, to find what seems to be isolated anomalies, to fit together to form the nuts and bolts of an emerging paradigm. We must continually ask new questions and never be complacent about the old ones or the answers that have come to pass. Scientists must continually be motivated by the mother of all questions. What facets of nature remain undiscovered? Because what we consider to be theoretical certainties, writes Beverly Rubik, who explores frontier science on the West Coast, may well be part of the emerging new paradigm we will discover. And that's where the arts come in. As we noticed that people observed the sun's rotation in the sky and therefore called the Earth the center of the universe, they did not ask the right questions. Those who did were persecuted until enough anomalies occurred to seriously question the church's decrees. The dominant paradigm of the mechanical reductionism that shaped science for the last few centuries, but was overthrown by developments in modern physics earlier this century, still govern modern biology and medicine. The discoveries and inventions of medical, mechanical reductionism, from which I have benefited with a procedure that repaired my heart without major surgery recently, was developed for the inanimate physical world, but determines the scope of questions that can be posed for living organisms. Conventional biology is the collection of theory and results based on those questions. Frontier science tests are exploring other features of life by asking new questions that go beyond the dominant paradigm. According to Beverly Rubik, their questions come from various frontier areas of science and medicine, such as epigenetic heredity, bioelectrical magnetics, homeopathy, and low-dose bioeffects. The results of their investigation, which may be regarded as individual anomalies by the mainstream, may be taken together as evidence of the need of a bigger paradigm to accommodate them. Biology, it appears, may be entering a crisis. We were believing that matter was insentient. We end up with matter of the brain and consciousness as unresearchable since it is insentient. Not only do the anomalies challenge our present view of life, but collectively they point to the necessity of a holistic view of life to complement the reductionist view. The two sides may face off, but being integrated in sacred geometry, the birth of the new is made possible. Whereas conventional science maintains that biological information is stored and transferred via biomolecular structures such as the DNA, anomalies show that other informational signals not stored in the chemical structures may elicit biological effects by possibly altering the information signals involved in biological regulation of the whole organism. Lamina is the cell adhesion molecule and is like rebar in cement, which holds the membranes together. Louis Giglio describes it as the scaffolding on which the cells have and use as glue. And I have a picture here of the lamina. And if you look at the caduceus, you can see the centers of the body represented where the two snakes cross over, and you begin to see the relationship between the ancient symbols arrived at before the invention of the microscope. I wanted to just mention that when we studied esoteric healing, when the teachers came from England for us, Brenda Johnson, luckily, she was our first teacher, and the medical students had asked Barbara Briner, who was the president of the Medical Association at the time, at their big conference, national conference in Texas, to bring esoteric healing to Michigan State University. And that is how it all began back in 1984. When we were trained, when we began to be trained, however, you know, some of us really just couldn't see the energy field at all. And we were just encouraged not to be concerned about that, because even when we used the techniques, whether we could see the energy field or not, those techniques still did make a difference in the person's energy field, and they could feel it and we could feel it, even if we couldn't see it. So we were instructed to understand that everyone experiences these things differently, and to just try to be patient with that. So I said, we're beginning to discover the invisible systems that need attention to maintain health and vitality. These systems transcend religious or cultural paradigms. By doing research on these systems of treatment, we will eventually have proof of the efficacy of energy medicine and be able to make it widely available to all who desire it as a standard medical practice. Thank you.